Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And today I'm going to show you how I can peaches. Now this isn't necessarily a how-to and the way you should do it. The reason I want to show you how I do it is because it plays into making my peach vinegar. So I've already got started, but I'm going to go ahead and bring you in a little bit closer and show you what I do. Okay, so I've already rinsed off my peaches, and what I like to do is instead of blanching, or instead of putting them in really hot water and soaking them and then peeling them, I simply cut them up first. And these we ended up getting Freestone this time, which is totally cool. Makes it easier anyway. And then I like to I like to cut the peach into eighths. Sometimes if it's a really big peach, I might cut it into like maybe into 12 pieces. And then I peel them. And I drop the peels into my half-gallon mason jar. Now I used to do it the way where you get them real hot and you peel them by hand, and that way you're only taking off the peel and not taking off so much of the fruit. However, since I'm using this to make vinegar, I actually want a little bit more of the fruit in there and not just the peel. And so I just do it that way. Now if I'm using a clean peach and I've got, and there's a lot of fruit left behind on the pit, I will toss the pit in there too. In fact, I did start tossing pits in there out of habit, but it's kind of unnecessary because there's really not much there. Not much fruit on it for it to matter. So anyway, I just pack the peach in that jar, and yes, sometimes I mix them up and put the peach in the wrong jar and the peel in the opposite. And this mason jar here is getting about to the point that maybe I'll put the skins from one more peach in there before. No, that actually looks, well, yeah, that looks pretty good. I'll show you how full that is. Because when I try to pack it down, it doesn't really pack down. So that's a pretty good amount of peach peel for that jar. Alright, so if I have particularly juicy peaches, which since these are Freestone, you'll find your clean peaches tend to get more juicy when you're trying to work with them. The Freestone, not so much, but these are really good peaches. I tried a couple slices and they're very, very tasty. Anyway, that's why I like using this kind of mat, because then I just pour the juice into this jar. You could pour it also into your other jars, but since I'm using this for the vinegar, I'm going to go ahead and add maybe an 1/8 cup of sugar. I don't need much to this because the peaches themselves, these skins, and since there's, a lot of meat basically on these skins, this should give me plenty of sugar. Okay, and now I'm going to top it off with my filtered rainwater. Whoops. Splashing water everywhere. And I can choose to put a grape leaf on here to help hold that down. Right now it's staying at the bottom. The peach peels tend to do a little bit better. Still over time though, they're going to start to float to the top. So you may want to do that. Now, to answer a couple of questions about the vinegar and the stuff that you'll start seeing on top. Now, I have questions on black mold myself. I would think if it's a black mold, I'm not sure if you want to keep working with it. I would do a little more research onto that. But a certain amount of mold on the top, that people are going to get it even when they weigh down their fruit. If it's green or white, it's really no big deal. Let the vinegar finish its process, then carefully lift the top layer out and toss it. Because the vinegar itself is going to kill the mold in the vinegar. It's really no big deal. And then you'll just strain your fruit out. Now, I find that putting a grape leaf on is very, very helpful, because if it is going to develop mold, most of it's going to stay on the top of the grapevine, so you just lift that out and it's really no issue. Some common things that you'll see at the top, and I'll show you here. This vinegar is done, and I got to strain it out today. This is one of my florals. I have a grape leaf in the top, and you'll see there is some mold on the top. and no big deal. But even some of the fruit, because of what you'll also find that your liquid level is going to drop. It's just natural evaporation. So I've got a little mold still on this, some of these petals and stuff that are here. That is totally normal. Now this right here you see is part of the mother. What you see at the bottom, that sediment, that is definitely the mother. Sometimes the mother will form as a gelatinous thick layer at the top, but usually that's something that takes a much longer time. It might even happen after you strain out your vinegar and put it away. That's usually when I get mine, is when I put it into storage for a while, come back a couple months later, and there'll be this nice thick SCOBY at the top. And that's what that is. It's normal, it's natural, don't freak out. That's actually a good sign that you've done it right. Just like as is this, and any kind of white or gelatinous layer you start to see at the top. This here is the blackberry vinegar I finally strained out, and to me it still needs to turn a bit more sour. It's really hard to see, but there is a sediment at the bottom. Okay, I can kind of get that in there, and you can see this white stuff at the top. Totally normal and totally safe. Okay, so back to the peach vinegar. I've added a little bit of sugar in there. Another thing you can do if you want to get that sugar mixed in there just a little bit is you can put on a tight-fitting lid and then just shake it up a little bit. Not a bad idea anyway, to kind of mix the juices and stuff from the peaches into the water better. And then take that off. Cover it with your cloth. And I'll still rubber band off this one since I have to strain it anyway. And then put it up in a warm spot for 30 days. And you will have peach vinegar. Now keep in mind, people have had this question too. Sometimes if it doesn't seem sour enough after 30 days, then leave it for another couple weeks and see how it does. Some will take longer to fully turn to vinegar than others. Just like that blackberry is taking forever for whatever reason. But it could be too that these were made with the frozen blackberries. Now I have several batches going that I started from fresh blackberries, and we'll see if those have a faster process. Okay, so I'm going to continue on filling another jar. I'm probably only going to do maybe 2 jars of the peach vinegar because I have a lot of other vinegars going, from the floral to the blackberry, and I still have the cedar and the peppermint. It still has some time to go, and I will be doing a video on that, I promise, once those are done. But I know they're coming along because the cedar, it even was very bubbly at one point, which means that it was in the process of turning to wine and then to vinegar. So I will continue cutting this up and filling these jars, and I will be back when and make another batch of vinegar when I'm ready for the next step, just so you can see what I do when I can. Alright, so on to the next step. I've got my jars all filled, and I wanted to show you one more thing. I decided to go ahead and start a 3rd jar of peach peel vinegar, but though I'm going to throw these to the chickens this year, and already gave them a few, just because I like to spoil them, and I think having a few different things in their diet now and then is good for them. One other thing you can do with these, and I'm sure there's a lot of other things, and by the way, if you have any ideas or suggestions or things that you do, share them with us. But anyway, last year I put these in my dehydrator and sprinkled just a little bit of organic cane sugar on them, and they kind of make a nice little peach peel candy, an actual true peach peel candy, and it was pretty good. But this year I'm not going to do that. I'm going to spoil my chickens. So there's another idea. Alright, so now for my next step. I got my peaches all in a jar. I have my filtered rainwater. I put 10.5 cups of filtered rainwater because it takes approximately 1.5 cups of water to top off these jars. And I got 1 3/4 cups of organic cane sugar in here because I still want a little bit of sugar. I just want it very little. So what this should work out to be is about 1/4 cup of sugar at the most per jar. And so I'm just going to top these off. And I'll continue on with that later, but what I want to make sure to show you is that, of course, if you're new to canning, one of the things you want to make sure you do is get all of your bubbles out. and using like a rubber spatula, the thinnest thing you can find. I think they actually make special little silicone things that you can stick in there, little debubblers. I'm not all about having one tool that's only good for, or having a bunch of different tools and each one's only good for one thing. So to me, a nice silicone spatula, maybe in a couple of different sizes, is just the best thing to have on. Okay, and then you want to make sure you wipe the rim of your jar clean. Now my jars were not hot for this because the peaches went in cold, and it's not, the liquid isn't going to be so hot mixed with the peaches to worry about cracking the jars. Now I'm using Tatler lids. So I put on my rubber ring, or you can do it this way, is actually easier. Put the rubber ring onto the lid and then hold it on there as you go like that, whichever way you find easiest. I usually put the rubber ring on first and then the lid. And then if you're new to using Tatler lids, here's the trick to how to figure out how tight to get it, because our hand and arm strength is all going to be different. So when they tell you put it on hand tight and then loosen it by 1/4 turn or something, well, that's all going to be relative compared to how tight you usually do things. I tend to put things on really tight. So what I found is doing it that way, I had issues with that. They ended up being too tight. The best way to do it is you put your band on, keep your other hand off the jar. Our tendency is to want to hold onto the jar and tighten it. Nope, keep your other hand off the jar. I've shown this before in other videos. And just start turning the band until the jar turns. Then that's as tight as you want to go. You don't want to go any tighter than that. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put all of these jars into my water bath canner for 30 minutes. You want to make sure the water is at least that far above the lid. And you need to boil it, and the water needs to be boiling the whole time for 30 minutes. And then as soon as you take your jar, as soon as it's done, you take your jars out, and you're going to have some mitts or a couple of towels, and then you crank the lid down tight right away. Now, I did read somewhere where some people like to let it vent for a couple minutes. I prefer to just immediately tighten each jar down as soon as I get it out. Those two things, the tightening like this, just till the jar turns before you put it in the canner, and then cranking it down after you pull it out of the canner, are the two important steps on using the Tatler lids to make sure you get a good seal. Since doing that, I have very rarely had any issues with seal failure. It still happens from time to time, like with just about as much as it does with your regular metal lids. And it could just be that I didn't move fast enough, I didn't quite tighten it down hard enough when I pulled it out of the canner, whatever. It just happens, and you know, those are the ones you either put in the freezer or use up right away. One thing I forgot to mention is that what I like to do sometimes with my home canned peaches and plums is to add about a teaspoon to a tablespoon of my homemade vanilla extract. And you can find a video on how I make this right up here. My favorite method is with the half of spiced rum and the other half of food grade non-GMO glycerin. It makes an awesome flavor to your vanilla extract. So you can find that video and see how I do that. And the other thing I wanted to say is that typically I like to keep my peaches pretty simple. I do this with most of my home canned stuff. I don't like to make them too elaborate because I like to use them in different things. Now, for example, the peaches. Mr. Rain likes to eat them very simple. You know, he'll just open up a jar and eat a little bowl of them for his dessert. And other times I like to take a whole jar and just dump it into my blender, add some whipping cream and some sugar, and use them to make some homemade fruit creamsicles. I know are all organic and good, healthy stuff. And when I say sugar, you can also add honey. But you can find a video on how I do that. I have a couple of them out there right up here. And I tell you, they're good and healthy and tasty and very frugal. So there's a couple of ideas for you to do with your peaches and some things on canning and using Tatler lids. So I hope you enjoyed this video and that maybe you learned something new. Thanks for watching, take care, and God bless.